So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I feel like there was a lot riding on this movie. Most in particular is because my cat is just going crazy. Is because the MCU hasn't really had a great movie in a long time. I would say after Avengers Endgame, which really did feel like the end of an era. It felt like the end of the golden age of the MCU. Ever since then, even though there have been some movies I've liked along the way, I liked Shang-Chi, and I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I enjoyed Multiverse of Madness. But then there was also Thor: Love and Thunder, which was atrocious, and then Ant-Man, which I've already forgotten half of that movie. I don't even remember it. But it hasn't necessarily been in the highest regards. But the Guardians of the Galaxy movies all have the same flavor and tone, mostly because they are all written and directed by James Gunn. James Gunn also kind of has a bit of a divisive vibe within the fandom right now, and I'm not really sure why. I don't really want to get too deep into it or anything, but I do like James Gunn. I don't think he's like the greatest director in the world, but I respect him from the way that he's built himself up. Because James Gunn was not just like a corporate suit. He's not just somebody they threw in there to go and lead DC or, to make Marvel movies and stuff like that. He didn't come from riches and stuff like that. If you go back into James Gunn's history and his career, the man started off with nothing. Like, he started off working for a movie studio called Troma. If you guys don't know what Troma is, you gotta look it up. It's amazing. They make the most schlocky, like, B-rate, over-the-top, like, Toxic Avenger, Poultrygeist, Tromeo and Juliet, which I think James Gunn wrote. Like, they are the most ridiculous, over-the-top, gory, exploitative movies of all time. And they're beautiful, and I love them. And James Gunn started working for them, getting paid nothing, just wanting to be involved with films. He eventually built himself up to a point where he was able to make some indie movies. I was a fan of James Gunn before Marvel, where he made Slither with Nathan Fillion and Super, which is a beautiful movie. Also super hyper violent, definitely hard R-rated, but you gotta see it. It's good. Which got him the attention of Kevin Feige and the Marvel people, which gave him the opportunity to do the first Guardians, which turned out to be a hit, which allowed him to work with Marvel more. So he made Guardians 2, now 3, and now he's been noticed and, so highly regarded that DC took him over to do some movies and now have made him the head of DC Studios or whatever. So I understand, like, being hesitant about, him taking over DC, but like, James Gunn is, like, he's a fucking nerd. Like, he actually grew up reading comic books. Like, he actually knows the lore. He actually knows, like, fucking comic books, like, way better than I do. I'm just kind of like a casual fan. So, like, to me, I'm like, James Gunn is sort of like the ultimate hero story of somebody wanting to create something and, make something of themselves and become successful in the world of, like, crazy nerdy shit. Like who doesn't want to do that? Like, that's what I want to do. Not necessarily direct Marvel movies, but, like, to imagine the fact that you can come from nothing and then build yourself up to the point where, like, you're managing a studio in charge of a bunch of fictional characters that you grew up loving and creating. I don't know. There's just something awesome about that. And so, whatever. Long story short, I respect James Gunn. Also, he's got a hot wife, so, he's living the dream. Anyways, we bring us to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is his final movie with Marvel and the final Guardians movie with this team of the Guardians. And it definitely is a movie that feels final, and every character really gets a full, well-rounded arc in this movie. I was really, really appreciative of how much I cared about the characters in this movie, where a lot of the Marvel stuff recently, I just, like, if anybody were to have died in those movies, I probably wouldn't have really cared. But this movie does a very good job at reminding you. It does two things. Like, it reminds you why you like these characters to begin with. It gives you sort of the feeling of the first Guardians, but it also puts you in a place where you see how far they've come and how close they may be to the end. I'm not going to spoil anything in this video, but it definitely has a conclusion for a lot of the characters' arcs, and you really see, like, the distance of how far they were since the first movie, and that they're not just carbon cutouts and copies of who they were. They're not just doing the jokey quips and stuff like that. I know a lot of people get mad at Marvel for, like, the jokes and the humor, and I do think it does get overbearing in some movies. And actually, one of my biggest problems with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was I thought it was too joke-heavy and too funny. I thought it went in the wrong direction. I really, really loved the first movie. The second movie, I like things about it, but I think it went too hard on the comedy. I am definitely happy to say, for me, for my taste and my personal enjoyment, Guardians 3 has probably the least amount of humor, maybe comparable to the first one, but it really goes as heavy as it can. I think as heavy as you can go in a sci-fi action movie that's PG-13 about a raccoon, I think it goes about as dark as you can go with that. There are some very, very like disturbing images and sequences in here, and knowing James Gunn's past, I was kind of happy to see it because it's just that old school influence kind of coming back. But I guess I would say that a large focus of this movie is on Rocket Raccoon, but we get a lot of flashbacks about the experimentation stage of when Rocket was young. We see him from like a very baby raccoon, and you're imagining how Rocket became the way that he was. He comes from being a regular raccoon into becoming the person that we met him, 2 movies ago. And it's all this kind of twisted, weird experimentation that happens. And he's not the only animal that's experimented on. There's all these other different animals and stuff. And so if you're an animal lover like myself and you like cute little adorable things, you're going to possibly be like a little off-put by some of the things that are happening here to these characters that look so cute, innocent, and adorable, but there's weird sort of like, I don't want to say body horror, because you don't really get you don't get horror, you kind of just see like the aftermath of it basically. But I would say for, again, like a PG-13 space action movie, it's pretty decently dark. And that is, of course, all tied to the main antagonist of the movie, whose name I can't remember, but he is, trying to look for perfection. He's playing God, and so he's, creating all these weird experiments with different types of creatures and life forms and pushing it as far as he can possibly go. It's like some really like God complex, mad scientist shit, which I really loved. I thought the villain did an excellent job. He's pretty much just an irredeemable piece of shit, and I like that they didn't try to play the sympathy card, because sometimes, like, I don't mind if you have a villain with a tragic backstory that turns them kind of dark, but sometimes you just want your villain to be a fucking dick. Sometimes you just want them to be as horrible and disgusting as possible, so you get that amazing catharsis if they get what's coming to them. You kind of just want every once in a while for your villain to be as bad as they can possibly be, and this guy definitely fits that. He's not exactly nuanced, but you don't need that in this movie. You just need him to be a prick, and he is. Now, another aspect of this movie that's interesting is that because of the Infinity War Avengers movies where they used the Guardians, they killed off the original Gamora in those movies. And so this Gamora is a different version from a different timeline. And Peter Quill, of course, is still in love with her. He misses her. And so when he has to interact with this Gamora, things are a lot different, and he's trying to get her to acknowledge that maybe they would be good together because of the past Gamora. This Gamora isn't having it, and I don't want to spoil this dynamic either, but I really like what they did with Peter and Gamora in this movie, and I like that it didn't go in possibly the way that you think it would, and it really, really works best to benefit Peter's character and where he's going to move in the future and the things that he has to deal with and overcome. And so I really, really appreciated what they did with that, and I was thanking James Gunn by the end of the movie for not doing the typical thing with it. And like I said, every character gets a moment to remind you why you love them. Drax was a character that I really liked in the first movie. Again, in the second movie, and over time, they kind of just made him into a big kind of bumbling joke character, and they kind of took away the destroyer part of Drax. In this movie, you get both. You get sort of the jokey, sort of fun, dry humor Drax, but you also get reminded that Drax is really fucking strong. Like, there's a great moment in the beginning of this movie, this action sequence that comes out of nowhere, which is awesome, by the way, where there's a super powerful character kind of running amok, and Drax steps in to fight him, and then you are suddenly reminded that, Drax is a fucking badass when he wants to be. And so I appreciated that. But they also called back to how Drax lost his family as well, and that there's a lot of nuance to him that maybe hasn't been seen since the first Guardians movie. And I think some of the things I'm seeing on Twitter is that people are having a problem with Adam Warlock in this movie and how he's portrayed. I cannot comment on how he's portrayed compared to the comic book version of him because I don't really know him, so all I can say is what he did for this movie, and I thought he worked pretty well in the movie for what he was. I think he had a great introduction. like bar none, probably the best introduction of any new character in this movie. And he's not a prime focus or anything, but he's definitely a presence within this entire movie. And I thought he was fine. You know, I thought he was fine. And I thought this movie needed to focus on its main core cast, which it does. It doesn't try to throw a bunch of other characters down your throat. It really focuses on the Guardians themselves. It has some great action sequences, of course, and a lot of great catharsis at the end for the characters. And they go through like some really heavy shit in this movie, most particularly Rocket, but that is mostly because of the flashbacks that you see from him. But like I said, Peter goes through a lot of shit dealing with the loss of Gamora, and a lot of the other characters too kind of hit sort of maybe their lowest or darkest points. But then there is this catharsis that sort of happens with it, where you sort of see them from the beginning of and end of their journey, and it sort of sets the course of where they're going to go from here towards the end. So to me, I thought this was probably the best way that you could conclude the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I don't consider them a trilogy, though, because in my opinion, a trilogy is 3 movies and only 3 movies. If you need more movies to explain the 3 movies, it's no longer a trilogy. That's just my definition. But overall, I gotta say that I really enjoyed it. You know, I thought it was pretty good. I think it's the best Guardians movie since the first one. I don't know if I would really be interested in any more moving forward, considering where the movie ended. I don't want to spoil anything. I mean, maybe. But if it's going to lose that flair, it would have to be something completely different. It'd have to be a completely different entity on itself. You'd have to get another director that has a very signature style. I wouldn't want to see like a cookie cutter Marvel movie in the Guardians world. Like maybe you can do that with the other movies, but not in the Guardians. It's just like you have this kind of perfect thing that's there. Maybe it's best to leave it where it's at, but then again, it's Hollywood, so they probably won't. But I gotta say that I enjoyed it. And you know where I'm coming from is that like I'm not like the hugest MCU fan at the moment. You know, post Endgame, I haven't really loved their movies, but I do gotta say that as far as the Guardians are concerned, they are some of the characters I like the best in the MCU, and I really, really thought this movie was a satisfying conclusion to the team that we've seen so far. So I would recommend seeing it if you're a fan of the Guardians. If you're just kind of like a casual fan and you don't even remember like who's Peter, who's Gamora, whatever, then maybe you don't want to see it. But if you followed the films and you've seen their stories kind of so far, this is a necessary component to see its conclusion. So that's what I thought, and that's my kind of spoiler-free review. So let me know what you guys think. If you saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 down below, let me know your thoughts and opinions about it. I thought it was way better than Guardians 2. I haven't watched the other Guardians in quite a while, so I don't know if I would put it above 1 right now. Maybe, but that's recency bias speaking. I have to rewatch the first movie. I don't know, but it's definitely better than the second movie. It's definitely better than the second one. So let me know what you guys think down below. Like this video and comment to help it in the algorithm. Also, if you want to support the channel on a deeper level, I do have a Patreon, channel memberships turned on, merch store, all that down below, along with the various social media links where you can follow me. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.